Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the South Star Classroom. Which episode are we on, Jubilee? What number are we up to today?
I think this is 111.
111. That's right. That's right. And we're missing part of the crew today. We'll get into that here in a second. But I'm here, David Castillo, one of the co-hosts, along with Jubilee Ransom, and we got you covered for today. Again, we have a very timely topic and an exciting, a big topic. Today, we are going to talk about all things math. We spent a lot of time talking about reading and other things that are happening in schools, and we want to lift up the importance of mathematics in schools and like what's happening, what are the latest trends, what's happening with the research. We're going to look at some data and have a deep conversation around mathematics and schools and our young people primarily. So with that, if you are watching us, make sure to interact with us in the chat. We've got some people chiming in already. Hello, Alonso. How you doing? Thank you for being here. And we will do our best to get to your questions and comments. But before we do that, let's do a check-in. So Jubilee, how are you doing today on this lovely Tuesday afternoon?
You know, I'm doing all right. I'm kind of missing the sun, and it makes me want to sing, Mr. Sun, Sun, Mr. Golden Sun, please shine down on me. Because it rains and it rains and it's been raining. I want to say since Thursday.
Right.
And it's been raining and it's been dripping. So, you know, I'm tapping into my inner sunshine to make it through the droopy days. But you know, but all is well. The school year is off to, you know, a smooth start. We've been having like homecoming weekend. So this is like a big homecoming weekend. A reminder that I have relocated officially to the South. Because I'm in Maryland and I didn't realize that, you know, it was like so South. But it is, because when it comes to football season, people are in it to win it. It's about football. It's about faith. It's about homecoming and teams and all that stuff. So that's what's happening in my world.
So Maryland is just, I mean, when you look at it on the map, you don't really consider it to be part of the South. But I guess once you get past a certain point, this invisible line, right? You start to sense a change in the culture and the customs, right?
For sure. And I mean, I love it. It's like there's a slower pace, but it's not too slow. That's why I didn't go further. That's why I didn't go to
Deep South.
South Carolina, even though I love South Carolina is one of my favorite places. I have lots of family there, but it's like it'd probably be too slow. So I needed a nice middle ground. So Maryland is that. But yeah, when it comes to traditions and when it comes to faith and football, it's here.
You can feel it. All right. Awesome. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, good to see you. I am doing well. We also, we're coming up on like the first like progress report cycle for school here. And so working through some of those issues. It's been an interesting school year so far. A couple of hiccups here and there, but I guess we'll get through it. We're still experiencing like beautiful. I mean, it's like 85 today, and the sun's out, and it's nice. We kind of have this like late August, September, even October, good weather, and then it starts to get like cold, but not cold like you're cold. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we were 58 today.
Yeah. Whew. All right. Things are changing. Okay, we have something here. All right. Well, let's jump into to the topic today. I believe, so episode 111, talking about math education. Yes. And wanted to start out with, and you know, obviously now just yesterday I was helping with some homework, and you know, we were working on like slopes and y-intercepts and, you know, doing some graphing, some of that like early algebra. So yeah, it's definitely happening in the house. You know, as a parent, obviously it went through schools. Math was actually one of my favorite subjects. I I think I took, I don't know if it was calculus, but it was probably something more along the lines of like pre-calculus, even in high school. And I took calculus in like college, and math. I didn't end up going into any field that required math like that, but math was always something that I enjoyed and I appreciated, even the really hard stuff. And then I was also a math teacher. I taught math for several years in San Francisco and in Oakland at the high school level. So I have a lot of different angles, around this particular topic. And so we wanted to look at what's happening right now nationally with math. Again, there's such a big conversation around reading, and that is totally critical. We often talk about like third grade reading, comprehension and proficiency. And in math, it's a very similar thing where the foundational building blocks of math start early on. They start even before school. They start with like young people counting things, right? Counting blocks and doing like sequencing and color coding and all these different kind of like pattern based things. And at some point, young people work their way into schools, and then everything just gets totally like abstract. You're like, why are we doing this, right? You move away from the concrete hands-on into the world of abstract, and then I think that's where people start to like lose interest and connection. Like elementary school, getting into middle school, and then a lot of people talk about like the 8th grade or 9th grade. Like if you are able to access, not just take the class, but actually pass algebra in the 8th grade, that sets you up to be able to take a 4-year high school sequence that leads up to something like pre-calculus or calculus, right? It's kind of like the gatekeeper. And I know in different parts of the country, in California, they've actually rolled that back. So I'm not even sure if they allow algebra in middle school. I think they just pushed it to like the high schools now or something like that. I don't know why, but anyhow, we want to look at some of this data when we talk about math. Obviously, during the pandemic, as with reading scores and most other measurable things that happen in schools, there was a tremendous drop across the board during the pandemic, and the same is true for math. And so let's look at what that let's see what that looks like right now. Let's see. Okay, so math performance among elementary and middle school students, right? That's the data that we have. Fell anywhere between 6 to 15% below pre-pandemic rates, right?
Wow.
So average of like 6 to 15, and they were already incredibly low, right? So this is not. There's only so much. It's only so much that we can drop. So that's still a significant drop. Math scores on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which we talk about. It's like the national assessment, the NAEP, fell last year by 9 points, the largest drop ever recorded, to their lowest level in more than 3 decades. Okay.
Whoa.
Those are the big, like, all kids in the group number.
3 decades, sheesh.
When you start to break that down by like low income, special education, African American, Latino students, the data gets actually even more alarming, right? Internationally, there's an international test that students take. Do you know what it's called?
No.
The PISA, Program for International Student Assessment, right? It's called the PISA. So there's actually like this international assessment. And let's see, in the most recent, the United States, students in the United States scored lower than their counterparts in 36 other education systems worldwide. And number 1, China, right? So
I could have guessed that. It was out of them before.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you totally could have guessed that. So, I mean, that's what the data looks like. And I mean, there are schools, I know, like say in Oakland, California, where I lived and worked for a long time, where it's normal to have high schools there where you have like sub 5% of kids are proficient in math, and they still go on to graduate, and somehow they go to college, and I'm sure they have a rough time when they get to college. But I mean, there are schools, there are districts, and now nationally, like, our children go to school for so much of their life, and we can't even say that they're actually learning anything related to math in any kind of like large number. Yeah. I see that as a problem. I think we should be talking about it more. Yeah. What are your off the top thoughts on this? I should be laughing. We shouldn't be laughing, but yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's like, it's unreal.
It's unreal. And, every time we have these kinds of conversations connected to academics and curriculum, I come back to the same place, which is we need to reevaluate what we are doing. So we have the K-12 spectrum, and we are, even though we have changed many things about how we teach math and what we consider to be proficient depending on the grade level. Yeah. I still think that there is a missing piece where we should be using, and I don't want to say projecting in terms of like what the jobs will be, but knowing that we are now in the fourth industrial revolution, like how does our curriculum, how does our educational system mirror what we know we will need in the workforce, in the coming 10 years? And I know there's the soft skills. So I'm not saying like we want to build a bunch of, children and field them for this specific thing, but how does the real world influence what's happening in the classroom? And just like to your point where you said, first things are concrete, right? Because I've always been a literature person. I do not remember learning to read. I do remember struggling with math. Everyone in my family, if we were on a game show and they were like, what was Jubilee's worst subject? Everyone would know it's math. I struggled with math. I never struggled with literature, right? So it's just like, when you think about that shift between concrete, where you have the manipulatives and you have the counting chart, and you have the number line and all these different manipulatives that you can maneuver to make sense of it. And then you shift and it's like, oh, it's X. Oh, hey, X. Now you're so important, right? And then you can kind of get with X and Y, right? And then it falls up, and now we have triangles. And I'm like, we asked this question when I was in high school. What do I need this for?
Right.
Okay, so it's an isosceles, it's a scalene. Gotcha. It's obtuse. What do I need this for again? Like when they taught percentages, what do I need this for? Oh, because if you go shopping and there's a discount, and if you want to invest and you want to see how much return you got, okay, fine. Right. So some things were applicable and other things were like outlandish, like what do I need to use this for? Right. And so I think that piece between what has like a high level of usability in a student's life right now in the future, and like what's just a part of the curriculum because it always has been, because it was a part of the curriculum in the 1930s, and we just feel like American kids need to know, you know what I'm saying? And so but society and this fourth industrial revolution and all these other pieces are in different places, and they are speaking. But are we listening and then taking that information and saying, actually, we have a whole unit on this skill. Mm-hmm. We don't really need a whole unit on telling time. What we need is, insert whatever the more, appropriate thing would be. So that's like my basic response. It's always reevaluate and pay attention to the ebbs and flows so that we have the most relevant curriculum. And I'm not saying that we should be changing it, drastically every year. What I am saying though is that it should be as close to what's happening outside as possible, as often as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I was having this same thought yesterday when I was, helping, doing homework with my son, right? Doing, trying to find the slope, trying to find the y-intercept, the initial value. And now, the thing that's changed, I think, when I was learning math, it was very abstract. There were very few like contextualized like ways to apply, what that actually means. So now what it looks like is just a lot more word problems, right? Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool, but still, like, like when are you actually going to ever like need to build that kind of a model? Maybe some people, I don't know. So I think what I hear you saying, and I agree with you, is like we just went over a bunch of data, right, about math achievement, right? And it's like, is that even the right data set to be looking at, right? Like if I'm going to go into the humanities, and I have, low test scores in, algebra and beyond, is that going to really impact my ability to like become a social scientist or something else in that field? I can take I can take statistics and I can pass that. That's an important one for the field, right? So I think matching the real world, and you're right, we haven't seen many shifts in math curriculum or even sequencing. It's like what it was when I was in school. It's very similar, and it's like, is that even the right pathway? And then the other thing, like backtracking, is I think the issue where when we talk about like reading, everybody's talking about reading and literacy. When they talk about literacy, it's your ability to decode, right?
Yep.
Make sounds, put sounds together, and then you move into like comprehension, right? Can you make meaning of what it is that you now can read?
Yeah.
And with math, the equivalent I would say is like basic computations, right? Can you do do you have an understanding of like number sense, the way that numbers grow and decrease, and
Yep.
and then can you do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division? Do you understand the basics of a number and what it looks like as a fraction to a percent to a decimal? Pretty much stops right there. Like that's like the core of it. And like if that was like the 12th grade math curriculum, I think we'd have, a lot more students would be successful. But for some reason, I think you're right. There's a lot of people taking a lot of kids taking high school math courses now, and they're just like, they're never going to apply these things that they're learning. I mean, my kid's in middle school now, and I'm like, I don't know when you're going to apply that. Maybe you will. That's fascinating to think about. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think like we could do a lot better, I think, as a country, if we really started to pay attention to the interest of students as well,
Right.
To be honest about that point of proficiency that you were just talking about, be honest about it. It's okay if you can be proficient in math, right? And I mean like basic proficiency that can support you as an adult, right? Whatever that point is where you don't need any more schooling around that to be okay as an adult. Nobody's going to pull the wool over your eyes, right?
Yep.
And I'm not talking about being like a business mogul and like real estate investor. I'm talking about like you go to the supermarket, right? Or you buy a house or whatever it is, and you have enough math in your mind, in your body, in your soul to make appropriate decisions, effective decisions, right?
Yep.
Fine.
Yep. It's interesting. I just looked at both of the articles that so we looked at two articles today for today's show. One is from the 74 and the other is from the what is it, the Hettinger report. And they're talking about math, they're talking about the math crisis, and in neither of the two articles do they even talk about the importance of like financial literacy, right? Because that's math, right? That's like that's what you're talking about. Like maybe we don't do anything beyond algebra, and then maybe we focus on like real like practical math learning, like, right? How about that? Personal finance, financial literacy.
Budgeting.
All
being in the black, being in the red. It's funny because a couple of years ago we were driving and my son was going on a whole rampage on this topic. And his whole thing, he didn't know how to say the term. He wasn't familiar with the term financial literacy, but he was like, why don't they teach us about money in school? Right. And it really always, makes me think about who these types of curriculum that we do have, right? Who do they serve? Who do they help? Right? To me, right, they support the predator, right? They support, they do not support Black and brown children, right? Who might get stuck on a level. Like when I was in 10th grade, I got stuck on what we used to call an MQ3, right? So it was like I did 9th grade, fine, made it through. 10th grade, maybe spring semester. That's as far as I got in math. I could not pass the other sections. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Right. I got into like a special co-op program, and I ended up having like a double period and a tutor, and that's how I made it through. But I couldn't pass it, right? But when I think about how curriculum is set up, right, who comes in needing more assistance, whether or not you get it or not, like who does that help? Not learning about financial literacy in school and not learning about financial literacy possibly at home, right? So now you're an adult. Maybe you flopped in math at school and you didn't hear that much about the sort of math at home that you need for life. So now you become an adult and you have 16 creddo cards over the limit. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a practical, how do I want to say it? There's an end result that isn't good, right? Not just for curriculum and academia and all of that in terms of being a student, but for life. If you're not great at math and if you don't have proper access and a certain level of mastery connected to math or in school and in life.
Yep. And to your point, when you think about that, like that's a very practical connection. Like if we look at math outcomes, and I'm not even talking about the advanced math, I'm talking about like core basic, like arithmetic and like basic early, like algebra. When we look at that data, what we see are the achievement gaps again, like we see with reading, right? With African American and Latino students performing well below their white and Asian peers, right? And so what that looks like, you're right, once people graduate is you have fewer tools to be able to sustain yourself like in your adult life, right? And that has real world consequences for people around financing, personal budgeting, kind of how you live your life and how you plan your life, right? Yeah. So that's definitely real.
If the truth of the matter is, you can deal with that. You can still have that as an issue, whether you go to college or not. You still have that piece. We all have the need for financial literacy, for budgeting, whether we decide we're going to go to college and get a degree or not.
Yeah.
And yet still, it's not touched upon in the K-12 spectrum, or it's not a mandatory part of it.
Yep. I like this comment here, and this is definitely real. Many teachers are saying that all students coming back into school from the pandemic are struggling to keep up with what's required of them to know. 100%, Alonso. And it's interesting. I've had this experience with, working in schools prior to the pandemic. I think going back to like, I started working in schools around 2002, right? Teaching, and I was always, and my first career was in the technology fields, right? I worked around a lot of like emerging technologies, and so I naturally was like trying to figure out how I could always incorporate technology into my teaching, into my planning, into my grading. So I had I had systems set up way back in the day where students were taking, we would take exams, they would do it online. And once they closed out of their exam, I could feed their grades right into my grade book. And it was just like, this is really easy.
Yeah, lovely.
And so I was always a big believer in technology. Early adopter, like I've talked about this on the show at Oakland Unity High School. We were a year zero partner with the Khan Academy. We brought them in, we used their platform in our math. It became part of our math program. It still is to this day. And so I was always like trying to encourage teachers to find like, is there a tech solution here? And there was a lot of pushback. Teachers were like, I don't even like the electronic grade book. I'm like, you have to use it. And now, and so now we've gone into the pandemic where we had to rely on technology, right? And I think a lot of teachers discovered some pretty cool like things, right? And now we're coming out of the pandemic, and it's like, okay, I get it. So you really like iReady, you know, and it does some good math practice and assessment and diagnostic, but like, no, you still have to teach math. iReady is not going to teach math to kids. You still have to, you have to actually,
model.
teach the math. Yeah, you have to model. You have to show kids. You should see. You should watch kids practice on pen and paper. Sure. And I feel like there's this pendulum now where kids are just doing everything on the computer, and I'm like, no, that's going to get us further away from where we need to go. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've had that experience.
Some kids, you know, math is a scary thing. It becomes a scary thing because just imagine, like, just think about like kids, you know, from when they were younger, they're 5 years old, they're 3 years old. You're going to find a kid randomly saying the alphabet and randomly just counting. They're not afraid of the alphabet. They're not afraid of numbers, but then they enter school and something happens that shifts their perception of, you know, what they're learning and maybe even their level of capability.
Yep.
Once that happens, good luck, because that fire, I think, is the main thing that you need in order to get a child to want to learn anything, right? And so we're talking about math, and that includes math, right? Because when it gets challenging, and when we now make this shift to, we're not just counting anymore, or now we're going to take these two numbers and combine them, or we are dealing with equations, or when the going gets tough, there's a passion and then there's a belief, right? So I'm talking about mindset that gets a kid to stick in there and be like, I can do this, right? So I do think that there's a mindset piece, there's an interest piece, and then there's a capacity piece on the teacher's side that can make math education really robust, really interesting, and then we'd have less kids hating it. I hated math. I mean, I am the poster child. I hate it. I went through college algebra and got like I think a C-. I ran through my house, David, screaming.
It's traumatic. No, I know. Yeah, it's traumatic.
Because I was not going to be able to graduate with my undergrad.
Anxiety inducing, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I got a C- after studying all freaking day. I would go to the study hall 9 to 5, right? And I pulled a C-, like working hard, but it just didn't make sense to me, you know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's a whole world of like, you know, looking at, you know, doing an analysis or an audit for any school or school system, district, state level, you know, like looking at math standards, looking at math curriculum, but really the curriculum is just like 10% of it, right? Like the real question is like, you know, do you have highly qualified, highly effective teachers in place that believe that all children can learn math, right? Sure. And then do those teachers, you know, in terms of resources, like, are they given the time to do planning, and do they have access to training to continue to like hone in their craft around teaching mathematics? Yeah. Like, I'm not talking about going to the, you know, the National Math Conference in Tampa Bay, you know, to have a 3-day vacation. I'm talking about like in-house, like, you know, PD. PD, like professional learning communities, coaching. Like coaching, all of those things. So that's like, I feel like that's a whole other piece. But I want to get back to your point. So we're going to helicopter up here for a second, and I want to talk about the one of the pieces that's talking about, they made this interesting connection between, you know, the math crisis and the potential for that to pose security risks for our national security right here in this country. And so we know that there's an emerging and growing fields in and around technology. That includes military technologies, engineering. American students lag behind their international counterparts in math proficiency. I said China is scoring the highest in the assessments recently. This has led to concerns about the USA's ability to compete on a global stage. That's true.
Definitely.
In fields like artificial intelligence, which is this is going to take off. It's not going anywhere. A significant proportion of graduate students and workers are foreign born, and many are recruited by other countries, right? This raises concerns about retaining talent and expertise within the United States. So we're looking at a labor pool, a talent pool that is going to build and develop the next generation of technologies that are foreign born. There's potentially some risk there. So even for the American born students that eventually move into those fields, we know that most of them are going to be white or Asian, right? So we're not even talking about like the lack of opportunity for Black and Latino and women, right, to move into these fields. This starts in K-12, right? This is where the opportunity gaps start, both for reading and math. So I'm going to ask you, I didn't plan this question, but I want to ask you, like, what are some of the challenges that we experience outside of just like poor teaching that can cause young Black, brown, female students to just not be successful in math? Like, what are some barriers that you see there?
Sure. You said, what are the barriers outside of poor teaching?
Yeah, talking about like the kind of cultural elements, right? The climate, the environmental elements.
For sure. I mean, it's stereotypes and myths, and poor messaging or no messaging that you can do it too, and we know that, which is why there's so much being said around gender equity, right? For me, when I was still in buildings, right, that whole conversation around gender equity was connected to the math and science for young ladies, and for Black and brown kids who may not have ever heard that they're brilliant and that they too can do complex math. So for me, I think the most major piece there is the mindset thing. It is the messaging or lack thereof around you can do it. The importance of efficacy, right? What I used to do in my building, a conversation connected to grit, was effective effort, right? And the fact that smart is not something you're born as, right? Smart is something you can get. Smart is something you can become. And if you apply, right, this is Jeff Howard's whole effective effort philosophy, right? But like, if you put in the work, right, and apply it in a specific way, right, taught by someone who has the capacity to be teaching it, right? If you do that over and over again, you can gain the muscle around it, right? And you can develop that skill set, thereby becoming smarter. And so throughout my entire career, myself and anyone who's connected with, to me, who's like running schools, if we were trained by like new leaders or any of these people who believed in this, we were going into our buildings, and these are the things we were saying to our Black and brown children and to our young girls and our young boys, because we realized that it was the mind that was stopping them from being able to access. It was the fact that they had not seen any examples at home. Maybe mom or dad didn't, didn't go past 8th grade, or maybe they were adopted or foster care or whatever, and they just didn't see many examples. Maybe there was shame attached to being brilliant, right? To be popular or to be smart. So we had to do a lot of messaging around mindset and getting them to shift to that mindset, the growth mindset.
Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking about this film that I talked about, I think with you all, maybe in the chat a while back, that has now come out. So A Million Miles Away, right? Currently streaming on Amazon Prime, on Prime. So it's about Jose Hernandez, who was and is an astronaut, right? Space shuttle. He's the first migrant farm worker to, he became an engineer, and then he eventually ended up in the space shuttle, I think Discovery, after having applied to NASA's program, I think 12 times. So like 11 rejections and like one acceptance, right? The final one, obviously. Fascinating movie, very well done. I recommend that everyone check it out. Point being is, like, here you have this, young Mexican American boy who's from a family that, is constantly moving in and out of schools, like, constantly popping in at different times of the year. And it only took one teacher, and like you said, like, can't, if you have, it doesn't have to be all of your teachers. Let me be clear. You can have like 2 or 3 teachers. And if 2 or 3 teachers in your time, developing in school, growing and learning in school, like, can connect with you and be like, Jubilee, you say you want to, go to law school, and like, you're, whatever, you're in the 5th grade, and it's like, you can do that, and then this teacher just like puts their faith in you, and like, that means so much, right? And and if it's real, right? If it's authentic, like, wow, this person really believes in me. So he had one teacher like really believe in him, and he still went through all of the rigmarole of, like, being the Latino Mexican American migrant farm worker student that was really smart and talented, and kept having to push back against the expectations that, like, yeah, you're crazy, you're not, you want to go into space, whatever, man, you're crazy, and this and that, and it's a true story. It is a true story.
I'm going to be watching it. Is it out yet?
It's out now. Yeah, you got to check. It's crazy. It's so inspirational. But this is it. This is like the actual story of and it's not to say that, like, so few of us are actually have the talent to do these things, but too many times, like, that fire, that, like, the love of learning, the candle gets blown out over and over again by people in the system, and obviously, like, people in our community, sometimes our neighbors, our family members, that just don't have the faith. They don't see the possibility, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think too, like, there, it's important to name the frustration that you can feel as a parent, right? So, like, I don't really see math. My son's one is in middle, one is in high. I don't really see math, right? I gotta act, because everything's online. They do everything on the Chromebook now. So I've got to do some digging if I want to see exactly what they're working on. I have an idea through our conversations, but I don't see it. But David, if my son comes to me now and is like, hey, I don't get this math, I'd be like, bro, listen, me neither. All right. He came to me when he was in maybe 7th grade, and I was like, bro, you got to go on Khan Academy, right? Like, this is above, and I've got 3 degrees. Math is not my specialty. It's just not. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I had to be honest and be like, Khan Academy, sign up. And he signed up. He got himself a support person, a tutor. He's like, Mommy, it worked. Amen. Great. But I'm a parent that understands that I can use that as a resource. But for other parents who may not be in education or don't know that, that level of frustration is real when your kid comes to you at home and they are struggling with math and they want you to support them through it. And you're like, I don't know how to do that. And there have been so many memes and so many posts when we shifted to Common Core math, and they're like, right, two alligators had 2 moms, and 4 popsicle sticks went, like, what's latitude and longitude of the equator? So they're like, what kind of question is that? And what is the answer? We do not know. A lot of just frustration and just trying to, like, figure out what this even means, so that is a point as well, where it's like the support system from parents has shifted. It's like, we didn't do math like that. We just added 2 numbers together. We got 2 + 2 is 4, and that's it. Now, if I show you how to do it the way I did it when I was growing up, it gets marked wrong, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's important to name that frustration, and that the fact that the bottom has kind of fallen out of that piece of the support system when it comes to math and students.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, like if you are a parent, I mean, really at any grade level, like the same core basic fundamentals are still kind of in place that we talk about for other subjects. So, you know, are you getting good information from your school, from your kids' teachers, you know, around how they're doing in math, right? Number one, you start off with the basics. Are they turning in assignments? Even like, what does math instruction look like in the class? You know, and then you know, when with math, it tends to be more like you know, exam and test oriented. So, you know, making sure, like, if there's a red flag, like, what do, right? You have a
Yeah.
big test on a new unit on like proportions or percentages or whatever, and you know, it's like, you don't, if you don't learn it, if you don't, it's very similar to like to literacy here, you know, where literacy development happens kind of in phases that build on each other, and so does math.
Yeah.
And if you miss something, you know, the pyramid is not going to be as strong as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And so you still have to have a plan in place to, like, you know, make sure that you know, either they're getting the help at home, you have access to like tutors, or you can ask the school, you know, what kind of resources are available, for sure. So I think parents should definitely be asking those questions, even if they moved into like you said, areas of math that, you know, parents probably can't help anymore. Once you get past like middle school and high school, it does start to get challenging. So I did want to bring up one other thing, and then I wanted to go into our niche notes, because we're getting close on time. Believe it or not, it's only two of us, and we're already almost there.
Yes, that too.
See, we get to talk more. It feels more relaxed. We're gonna cut off Omar, and we're cutting off Charles. They're
That's
gone.
That's it. Executive decision.
Bye. Yeah. So a couple of things here. So I wanted to talk and raise this issue of you know, we talk about reading and we talk about dyslexia, right? Which is a real thing, right? And even in California, we're finally getting to the point where the state is getting serious about mandating screenings, right, in elementary school, right? You can have some young people never get diagnosed with dyslexia until they're in their high school years or even beyond, right? It's like, if you can catch it early, like, you can, there are ways to, you know, to work around the condition, right? You change the way that instruction happens. But a lot of people are not aware that when we talk about math, there is a similar condition known as dyscalculia, right? And it is it is essentially also, it's a learning difference, a learning disability, that has to do with, you know, how people are able to, you know, they look at numbers and the way that they're able to order numbers. It's very similar to dyslexia, but it just doesn't get talked about because so much of our resources and time and funding has gone into literacy and reading, which makes sense. But I think hopefully we're in this moment where we can start to talk more about you know, some of the research and move that research into practice in our schools. To help young people. So so there was that, and then yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, that pretty much wraps up the two pieces. Do we want to move into our niche notes for
for sure
week? Yeah, what do you have to offer?
Yeah, I think in terms of instruction period, right, the mindset piece is really, really, really important. And you would be surprised as an educator, as a leader, as a parent, how much more a child, adolescent, young adult what can accomplish when they have a paradigm shift around their own capacity and ability. So I think my niche note is around that, like really pushing the growth mindset and encouraging students in that way to let them know, yeah, you are more than capable of doing it. And just because something is hard, challenging, doesn't make it impossible. And I think just using even more resources to like galvanize around that thought that like I am possible. I am more than capable of doing hard things in reading, in math, in science, right, and writing, and all the things. Because for all the schools that I have visited and been connected with for my entire career, the schools that moved the most, the schools that made the most gains, right, and had the happiest students, or the students that believed the most, really were grounded and founded on the growth mindset. And what they, of course, the community was safe, and there were a bunch of culture pieces, and it was a community, right, and that's important. But they really believed. So as they progressed and the stuff got harder, they still had the mindset to look at it and be like, oh no, but I can do that. And instead of me, bowing out, instead of me quitting, I'm going to look for a resource, some kind of support to be able to do whatever it is better, but I'm not going to quit. And I think that's a critical piece, especially for math instruction. Yep. So that's my niche note. Oh, and huge. Stop skimping on PD, man. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Stop skimping on PD for math, man. Like, we pull out the bells and the whistles, and we're flying in this person and that person to talk about literacy and reading groups and the science of reading, all that. And math is like, hello, I'm math over here. Like, what are we saying? And I get it, because there's this whole thing, well, without reading, you can't do math. And it's like, I mean, I guess to a certain degree that is true. But when you talk about the gentleman in the movie, and when I think about the NASA movie, I forget it, with the 4 women who were doing, I can't think of the Hidden Figures, right? Yeah, like I'm sure they were reading stuff, but they were doing math. They were doing long enumerous equations on a board. They were not reading word problems.
Yep.
Right. And so like Annie up on the math PD, many PDs, the same attention that you give for ELA, right? Give that to math, and that can change a lot.
Yeah. Coaching, providing coaching to math teachers, creating space in PD to allow math teachers to talk to one another, right? To dialogue. All of those things, for sure, 100%. So this week for mine, I think I had several things I wanted to mention, but I think I'll stay focused on the school side of things for my niche notes for this week. I have 2 because we're kind of in this interesting period in the school year again. So thinking about where we are in the school year, a lot of schools or have done or are doing like their in-house assessments. So there's probably not one single school system that only does standardized testing, right? Public school, everybody's now using an NWEA or an iReady or this or that. They're using some kind of like in-house assessment platform, and they're taking the time out to have students, take these assessments. So my thinking here is that, like, if we are going to take the time out of instruction to do these assessments, I think it's critically important that school systems communicate out to the community, like, here's what we're doing next week. Here's what people are going to be taking, your students are going to be taking assessments in. Here's why it's important, right? And here's what is going to happen afterwards, right? And what is going to happen afterwards is, like, we are going to provide you with some information and tutorials. So as a parent, you can understand your student's report, right? And then you're going to get 2 more this year. And also in-house, making sure that there is some kind of plan in-house for it. Like, if you are going to take these assessments, the data is accessible immediately, right? And so what are teachers doing with that data? What are administrators doing with that data? What are districts doing with that data? It's not good enough just to take the assessments and say, okay, we'll see you again in 3 months, right? You have to take action on it if you want to see growth and if you want to actually move the needle for people. So I think for me, and I'm helping some of my current clients around, kind of shifting the culture around these things, around creating awareness.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we're taking these assessments in ELA and in math and in science and in, history or whatever subjects. And here's what it means for you, parents. And here's what it means for our students. And here's what our staff are going to be doing with this information, right? We're going to be looking at data, and we're going to be doing some goal setting, all of those things, right? So that's my big one. That's number one. And let me see if I can remember number two, because it's something similar. What was number two? I think it's gone. Wow, it's crazy. Yeah.
Hopefully it'll
Let me see if
back.
yeah, maybe it'll come back.
Yeah.
It was around the time of the year. I don't know. Yeah. So maybe I have one. How about that?
Well, yeah, and if it comes back, it comes back. Like your comment had me thinking about just the importance of using data in the beginning of the year at this time of the year. Technically it'd be great if whatever data point, assessment was given was already like analyzed, trends identified, and then that's used to figure out, where the needs are and where the instruction is going. So to Alonzo's point earlier, like, I think that could be part of the issue, right? That we are basically having a bunch of like autopsies. Like, get the data too late, and we know that the children are coming in and they are, far behind. So what are the tools that we can use at the beginning of the school year to help us walk into instruction with awareness?
Right.
Having a baseline assessment in October when school starts in August is crazy. Yeah. It's like we done been in school 2 whole months. So, and Lonzo said you should discuss how teachers are leaving due to the poor support they get from their superiors. Yeah, very, very, very true. I think there's a lot of pressure on everyone. Administrators got the pressure on their back, whether it's bureaucratic pressure or district office pressure. And then that ends up coming down to teachers, right? And it's like without clear mission, vision, like what are we doing here and how do we keep the main thing thing, it's going to keep on happening, unfortunately.
It's come back to me. My second niche note, and then we'll go into closing thoughts, and then we can wrap up. So I mentioned it earlier, and this is just like something that I've noticed. We've all noticed a huge shift towards a lot more technology in schools, right? You were saying it earlier. Your boys are like heavy on the Chromebook, right? A lot of the work happens in the Chromebook, and so it's interesting because when I was first kind of like, and this is a while ago. This is literally like 20 years ago. Really started to push heavy on do some culture work at our schools around incorporating more tech. You constantly got the nothing will ever be able to replace a teacher. I'm like, yes, of course. I'm not looking to replace teachers, but I'm saying that as a teacher, your job can be made easier, right? Through the use of technology, but you are still the teacher. And so, we had pre-pandemic, we went into the pandemic and we were fully online, and now we're coming out. And so my niche note, my recommendation, what I want to bring awareness to is like, I feel like we actually need to pull back now from the overuse of technology. When we're talking specifically about math instruction, there is nothing more pure than, a math teacher doing a real-time lesson on an overhead, walking students through step by step, and then allowing them to do it. And when I say allowing them to do it, I'm saying now they are doing it on pencil and paper. And as the instructor, as the teacher, you are walking around and like visually observing them walk through whatever exercises that they're doing. So you can see, when they're going to make that mistake, because they ultimately will, right? That's like real teaching. That's real observation. That's like real-time feedback. And there's a human element to that you're never going to get on any kind of online platform.
Yeah.
So that's my universe, my niche note to the universe. Pull back on the tech. Let's get back to some semblance of like, like the teacher is the facilitator of knowledge here. The technology can be used as a supporting device and mechanism in technology, but again, the teacher is the teacher at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. I love this, Alonzo. The beard of knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. The beard of knowledge.
All right. I got to let it grow out a little bit more. Okay. So yeah, closing thoughts. We're 2 minutes up. You know, we've had a good conversation about math. We've talked about a lot of different aspects and our niche notes. And so now, what are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, as with everything else, that our nation needs to come to the drawing board, get people who are in the fields, get the stakeholders, and come to the table and some real informed decisions about what our curriculum looks like for our now and for our next. And I think we're in a very, a challenging place because we're dealing with the fallout from the pandemic still, right? And I know people may want to act like, oh, it was 3 years ago. And it's like, yeah, but we still are experiencing the negative impact from the pandemic, right? And in all sorts of ways, right? Social, emotionally, and academically, right? So there's that piece. There's the whole catch-up piece. There's making sure that we're addressing the students who they didn't fall back, right? They're on or above grade level, right? Whatever we determine to be grade level now. And then for the future, right? So, and the future is to me also a challenging place because it's like not just what our nation needs. I think that's probably what other nations do, right? They look at what they need and then they make sure that they're teaching that in schools or what have you. Not just what our nation needs, but what interests our children. Like we're no longer in the place where we can continue to drown out the voices, of the user, right? Our students, our children, they're the user. And this generation is way more different. And so if we continue to keep on hitting them upside the head and forcing calculus down their throat and trigonometry, and like, we don't care. We want to make a TikTok video, or I'm going to open a business when I'm 14. It's just like we're missing each other. And so I think by coming to the table and ensuring that all stakeholders are represented, including the students who have to consume whatever this curriculum is, we can start to have more meaningful conversations around how we need to shift what math education looks like. In the meantime, and forever, please talk to students about growth mindset, right? That they really can apply effective effort and learn anything, right? And SMART is something that you get. And please provide appropriate training consistently for teachers in math. Stop sweeping it under the rug and making it secondary.
Yep. Bam. Wow. Okay. It's going to be hard to follow that up, but I think I'm gonna go off of Alonzo's comment here. I like this. So we talked about very like big picture. We talked about like global issues. We talked about national security. All of these things that are real, like out in the real world. We talked about national math data. We talked about international math outcome data, but really focusing in and kind of like looking under the microscope. The unit of change here is like the classroom, is the school district, right? Sure. And so I think that's where we really need to like start. And even, I'm not to say if, but even when we get to the place where we have we figured out the correct like sequence for mathematics courses, and we have the methods and the techniques that are aligned to the best like science for how people learn math, right? Those are just the tools.
Yeah.
Without the fundamental without fundamentally being able to like close the belief gap, right, we are still going to have an achievement gap. And so this is like my closing thought is just around like everything that we just said in the last hour. It's irrelevant, it's moot, unless we still deal with what we talk about on this show frequently, if not weekly, is the belief gap.
Yeah.
And so making sure that, you know, we are continuing to work and put educators, put adults into schools that have a fundamental belief that all children, regardless of their background, can learn, can grow, can excel academically, socially, in schools, right? Like then that's the human element of it. So
yeah.
That's my closing thought. So,
all right.
Are we good?
We're good. Just the two of us.
All right. Awesome. Well, yeah, let's check with the other two. They're not here. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Appreciated the comments, and we will see you all next week. Signing off.
Bye.